Donna's World. Hello everyone, welcome to Donna's World. Thank God it's Friday. I want to start with a brief tribute to Huub Burkhout, a Dutchman who came to Nigeria decades ago and loved it and decided to stay and worked with a distinguished Nigerian business family called the Akinkubes to set up a publishing company that was very famous, very respected, and he just passed away. And I always think of foreigners who love Africa and decide to live here despite all the problems like power cuts and issues. I always have some admiration for them because Africa does offer a lot of advantages in its own way. I mean, it's totally different from Europe or America or Hong Kong or Singapore or wherever. But I guess every society and every environment comes with advantages. And I admire white people who can see the advantages in Africa and who come here and add value to our lives professionally or personally. And Huub Burkhout was one of them. And I once wrote a romance for his publishing company, or the publishing company that he ran, and it was a Sunshine Romance, was the range he was trying to set up, and it was complete rubbish. My book was complete rubbish. But anyway, that was an interesting time in my life when I was much younger. But the thing I remember most about Huub was the fact that he once published a book called What Men Know About Women. And every single page was blank. And that just made me laugh for days. I actually have a copy of that book somewhere, but I can't find it. So I think someone's probably stolen it because I'm normally very well organized and I normally know where everything I have is. So, well, it could be in my house in London, but I think it was here and I think somebody has walked away with it. Such a clever idea. What men know about women? Nada. Nothing. Okay, so farewell to Huub. And also a little tribute to the black people and the brown people and the Asians who see good things in Europe and America, and people who see good things in environments they weren't born into, deeply flawed environments in many cases. I mean, for example, I've got a relative who went to study in Russia in the 1960s, I think. And, we could never understand why he went there. It's so cold. I mean, great, Russia has great architecture like in St. Petersburg and stuff like that. But, to visit when the weather is not too bad, not to live there during winters that sometimes hit -40. But this guy could see the good in Russia and actually married a Russian woman. And, I like people who have an open-minded attitude towards the world. The many Nigerians who've settled in America, the many Americans who have settled in other countries. So, you guys are true citizens of the world because you don't allow yourselves to be restricted to your native environment. I mean, I think I would have been if I'd been a bit more courageous. I really have often seen myself living in the south of France or in, Los Angeles or in a deserted beach house in Senegal, Dakar. I do have that romantic streak that enables me to imagine myself living in India or somewhere else. But somehow I've always played it safe and stayed in places like, well, the two places that are my homes, which is the United Kingdom and Nigeria. I've never really strayed far beyond them for more than a few weeks at a time. I think the longest time I've ever spent in a country that isn't my own was when I spent a few weeks in Washington as a journalist, and I also spent 5 weeks in Austria once in a spa when I was really down. I was about to have some kind of breakdown. So I just took off to this spa in the Carinthian Mountains near Klagenfurt in Austria, because I had a friend who was linked to the establishment and gave me a significant discount, because that place really is for rich people, seriously rich people. And, while I was there, I actually went there about 3 times. And, I bumped into European monarchs, a queen, I won't tell you which country, um, and, Russian oligarchs. And so I'm very grateful to the friends who enabled me to go there like 3 times, and at a very discounted price. But anyway, all I'm saying is, kudos, congratulations, much admiration. I salute the people who are able to go and live in a foreign environment in a positive frame of mind, for long periods of time. If I'd had the courage, I probably would have lived somewhere other than Nigeria or the UK, neither of which I find particularly exciting or fulfilling. It's to do with courage and adventurousness. And actually, I was going to talk about something else today, but remembering who the Dutch gentleman who died, who gave so much of his life to Nigeria, made me wander off on a different path and say, kind of, we could all be a lot more adventurous. I mean, even if you're not going to wind up, let's say you're from Wisconsin or from Manchester in the UK or from Lagos in Nigeria. Okay, so maybe you're not going to go off and live in Japan for the rest of your life. But it's quite good to sort of get up and go and live in Japan for 5 years, if you can, and try and see the world, And it's not just about travel, really, or living in foreign countries. It's about taking risks. There are people who, for example, would never marry a foreigner even if they really liked them. Not because they are racists or tribalists, because here in Nigeria, we have tribes which are almost like different nations, So here in Nigeria, if you are from a southern tribe like me, marrying someone from a northern tribe is a big deal. It's practically like marrying a foreigner. In fact, sometimes your parents would prefer you to marry a foreigner than to marry someone from another part of Nigeria, which is kind of weird, okay? So it's to do with taking gambles. Take a gamble on love, I mean, if you're Chinese and you're terrified of marrying somebody from Mexico, or, there are people who say, what the hell? I'm going to take a gamble. I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to be adventurous. I'm going to try something new and different. And if it doesn't work, so what? At least you've tried. I always remember reading that a nurse who worked in a hospice, which was for people with terminal illnesses, they were dying. They knew they were dying. And, the whole point of the hospice is so that you're in an environment where you're properly supported in your final days. And this nurse said that what really struck her, I may have said this before on Don Iswell, but anyway, maybe I have, maybe I haven't. Let me say it again if I've said it before. That what struck her was that when people knew they were dying, that they had very few days left, they weren't even so much afraid. They were angry with themselves often because of the things they never did that they wanted to do or could have tried, and or the things they never said to people they loved or hated or whatever. In other words, they regretted playing it safe. And I think this whole thing about always playing it safe and saying, oh no, I could never marry a Chinese person, or I could never marry a white person, or I could never marry a black person, or I could never live in Peru or wherever. I think we need to get out of that hole. We need to shake all that prejudice and fear out of our systems and become more adventurous, because oftentimes you will find a more receptive environment in a new and more receptive, environment in a new place. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe if Huub Burkhout, the guy we started this show with, maybe if he'd stayed in Holland, he would have been a great publisher in Holland. But here in Nigeria, it's also possible that he was only able to achieve what he achieved because he did it in a different environment, and he took that gamble. Honestly, he's so famous here, so respected. There's also sometimes a lot less competition in some of these developing countries. So, maybe in Holland there are more publishers. Maybe he wouldn't have stood out from the crowd so much in his own original country. And I just think there's so many examples of people. I mean, I can see myself, I can literally visualize myself walking barefoot on a beach in, I don't know, like I said, Dakar or the Caribbean. I can imagine myself living in a little whitewashed cottage, writing novels. And that's another thing I never took a gamble on. I played it safe. I wanted to write. I'm a naturally talented writer, if I say so myself. And so I did journalism, where you write something, just 1,000 words, 1 page, 2 pages, maximum 5 pages, because I never had the courage to sit down and write something much longer, apart from the novel I wrote for Hoop Burkhouse, the romance I mentioned earlier, which was pulp fiction, and I didn't even use my real name because it was, it wasn't writing, it wasn't quality writing of the standard I had in mind, and neither, we didn't pretend that we were trying to produce quality fiction. We were just trying to produce soft, sweet, romantic stories that would please people, even if they weren't particularly well educated. But I've always known that I've had it in me to write a great novel, something serious, something thought-provoking. Sometimes I look at other African writers like Chimamanda Adichie, and or let me just say Chimamanda because that's how she's known. Other Black writers, white writers who are friends. Some of them I even know them personally. And I think I could have done that. I could have done just as well or better. And I don't mean that in a nasty competitive sense, because everybody's got their own voice and their own style. So I'm not saying I could have done better than Chimamanda. I've always known that I could do as well or even better than some of the people, some of the novelists I admire, So I'd like to know. So we all run around, well, not everybody, but most people are too afraid to take the plunge. They're afraid of criticism, or they're afraid of living away from their families or the communities they grew up in, or they're afraid of, writing or painting something that isn't appreciated by everybody. And I really want to, this week is a tribute to the people who picked up their suitcases or their pens or their paintbrushes and who took risks in so many different areas of life. And sometimes they failed, sometimes they succeeded, but at least they tried. They're not going to wind up in some hospice dying and thinking, I'm really angry with myself because I never even, there's so many things I wanted to do, but I didn't do. So we're still alive and we're still kicking. So this is the time to do all those things so that you're not bogged down with regrets at the end of your life. And before I go, let me just say that I would love to hear what regrets any of you have, or what things you think you need to start now to make sure you don't have regrets at the end of your lives. Thank you. And now, briefly, viewers' voices. There aren't any this week because this video was recorded because I'm traveling. So I recorded this video straight after the last Friday video, pretty much on the same day. And so there are no viewers' voices yet. So whatever you say in response to my previous video or this one, we'll do the week after. Thank you.